I spent a full year working 12-hour shifts in a place so hot the air felt like it could peel the skin off your bones. And every single day I survived it by holding onto one picture in my mind, my quiet hilltop in Arizona. 8 acres of desert wind, open sky, and the stubborn little house I built with my own hands. No neighbors, no noise, and absolutely no HOA. So when I finally drove up that familiar dirt road, I thought I was dreaming, or hallucinating from the heat. Because standing on my land were 20 brand new luxury mansions, gleaming in the sun like a Scottsdale billboard. Fresh asphalt, stone gates, security cameras, manicured lawns. And right at the entrance, bolted into my soil, was a giant sign, Sandstone Ridge Estates, private HOA community. They thought I was gone forever. They thought no one would come back to claim this hilltop. They were wrong, and they were about to learn why silence isn't surrender, it's strategy. Before we dive in, let me know where you're watching from and what time it is, and don't forget to subscribe for more wild HOA stories. When I first stepped out of my truck, the heat rising off the pavement didn't feel like the old familiar desert warmth I remembered. It felt different, artificial, manufactured, like the kind that radiates off a newly paved HOA street laid by people who think nature is a nuisance to be covered instead of respected, and that's exactly what I was looking at. 20 immaculate houses lined a road that used to be nothing but dust and mesquite. Perfect little pastel boxes with matching tile roofs, each one cookie-cutter enough to make Stepford look rebellious. My land, my hilltop, had been carved into neat little HOA-approved parcels, every inch of it wearing perfume and makeup trying to hide the robbery underneath. I slammed my truck door harder than I meant to. The sound cracked through the desert air loud enough that a couple on the nearest porch looked up from their wine glasses. They stared at me, this sunburned, road-tired, dusty old man, as if I was the trespasser here. I knew that look. The "you don't belong here" look. A look I've seen from soldiers, contractors, bureaucrats, and now wine-sipping HOA newcomers. The man raised his eyebrows, smug and mildly annoyed. The woman lifted her fingers in a tiny patronizing wave. The kind reserved for stray dogs who got too close to the picnic table. I ignored them. My boots hit the asphalt, my old dirt road, each step heavier than the last. That's when I saw it. The sign on the stone entrance pillar. Bold, glossy, expensive. Sandstone Ridge Estates. Private HOA community. Members only, on my land. I ran my fingers along the sign. The metal was new, still warm from the welder's torch. Bolted into stone that hadn't existed here a year ago. They hadn't just built homes. They'd rewritten boundaries, invented a community out of thin air, and plastered over mine. As I stood there, the sound of heels clicking echoed behind me, sharp, confident, and fast, like someone who thought they owned the ground they walked on. I knew even before turning who I was about to meet. Every HOA story has a queen, and here she was. A woman in her 50s strutted down the pathway, tan linen suit, clipboard tucked under one arm, phone in the other. Hair carefully curled, sunglasses big enough to double as a riot shield, every step measured. Every gesture deliberate. The kind of woman who practiced her smile in the mirror because she didn't trust her real one. "Can I help you?" she asked, voice dripping with customer service poison, not welcoming, not curious, just irritated that reality had inconvenienced her schedule. "Yeah," I said. "You can tell me why there are 20 houses on my land." Her lips didn't move, her eyebrows didn't move. Her expression could have been carved from refrigerated butter. "Your land," she echoed, adjusting her sunglasses like she was trying to block out the sight of me. I jerked my thumb toward the ridge. "My house is up there. Been mine for 15 years. Check the county records if you need homework." She gave a polite little laugh, the kind that isn't laughter at all, just air expelled to signal superiority. "Oh, you must be looking for the HOA office. It's in the south unit behind the stone walkway." "No," I said, slow and steady. "I'm looking for an explanation." A flicker crossed her face, annoyance, not surprise. The same look a teacher gives when a kid asks a question she thought she'd already answered. "Well, she said this property was classified as transitional land after more than 12 months of non-occupancy. No utilities, no mail, no response to notices. Under county code, it was listed as available for provisional development, transitional land." I almost laughed. "I filed documentation with the county before I left," I said. "Travel notice, monitoring service, temporary absence, not abandonment." "We followed county procedure," she replied, smile sharpening. Stone Ridge Estates applied for emergency development authorization. Everything was approved by the book, By whose book? I shot back. By the county's, she answered, sounding pleased with herself. Then, like she was awarding herself points, she held out a perfectly manicured hand. Karen Holdridge, president of the Sandstone Ridge HOA. Welcome to the neighborhood neighbor. I didn't shake her hand. I didn't say a word. Because in that moment I felt it. The switch. The shift. The thing inside me flipping from confusion to clarity. This wasn't a misunderstanding. This wasn't a clerical error. This was a takeover. I turned and walked back to my truck. Every step slow. Controlled. The way you walk when you know you're standing on a battlefield you didn't choose. Behind me, Karen stood watching, arms folded like a queen, confident her castle was safe. When I reached my truck door, I looked once more at the sign. Private HOA community. Members only. I muttered under my breath. Not anymore. Then I drove the perimeter road. My perimeter road slowly. The land felt different on the surface, but underneath it, was still mine. I knew every dip, every ridge, every stubborn patch of earth that refused to grow anything but cactus. You can rebrand land, you can pave it, you can decorate it, but you can't make it forget who it belongs to. By the time I reached the highway, the anger had cooled, hardened, focused. Everything I'd endured overseas, the heat, the discipline, the endless hours had given me a gift, the ability to stay calm when it mattered. This wasn't the time to shout, it was the time to prepare. That night I checked into a cheap roadside motel, neon vacancy sign flickering like a dying firefly. I sat at the tiny table, pulled out every paper I'd ever saved, deed, plat map purchase, records, tax receipts, service agreements, old papers, some yellowed, some crisp, all of it mine, all of it proof. The silence in that room wasn't peaceful. It was waiting. I stared at the deed under the lamplight, my name printed clean and firm, my signature below it. I'd always trusted that paper. Believed it was a shield, a promise no one could break. But that was before someone forged new promises on top of mine. Someone had taken my absence and twisted it into opportunity. Someone had counted on me never coming back. I leaned back in the chair, the weight of it all settling onto my shoulders. Then I whispered the thought that had been building all day. This isn't over, not even close. I wasn't confused anymore. And I sure wasn't helpless. If the HOA wanted a fight written in paperwork, they were about to learn I'd been trained in far worse places than a county office, and the first battle would begin at sunrise. Sunrise in the Arizona desert doesn't come gently. It doesn't peek over the ridge or stretch its arms like some polite guest. It arrives all at once, blunt, bright, and unapologetic, which was fitting. Because I woke that morning with the same energy. I took one long breath of motel air, smelling faintly of old carpet and cigarettes. Someone lied about smoking, and gathered my papers. Today wasn't about yelling or marching into the HOA demanding justice. I sat at the tiny table, pulled out every paper I'd ever saved, deed, plat map purchase, records, tax receipts, service agreements, old papers, some yellowed, some crisp, all of it mine, all of it proof. The silence in that room wasn't peaceful. It was waiting. I stared at the deed under the lamplight, my name printed clean and firm, my signature below it. I'd always trusted that paper. Believed it was a shield, a promise no one could break. Posters about recycling that nobody has followed since 2007, and behind the front counter sat exactly the person I expected. A young man in a faded county polo shirt, slumped like gravity, hated him personally. Morning, I said, setting my folder down. I need property files. Parcel registered under the name Riley Martin. He typed without looking at me, one finger at a time, then spun the monitor around casually. Yeah. We've got 2 files, he said. I blinked. 2. He nodded like someone announcing the weather. 1 original ownership record, and 1 transitional claim filed, looks like 9 months ago. Transitional claim, that phrase again, like they were trying to soften the blow of theft by dressing it in bureaucratic baby clothes. Pull it up, I said. He opened the document. Right there on the screen was something that made my blood go thick. Statement of intent to vacate and forfeit. Signed supposedly by me. Except the signature looked like someone had traced my name while riding in the back of a moving bus. Worse, there was a co-signer line. Someone had signed the name Gerald Martin, my father, a man who had been dead for 7 years. My jaw locked so hard, it hurt. That's not my signature, I said quietly. The clerk shrugged, helpless. It went through, was processed, scanned, and verified by the notary. Leonard Pierce. I stared at him. Pierce had notarized plenty of things for me years ago. until he retired. 5 years ago. He's retired, I said. Has been for half a decade. The kid squinted. Huh. That's weird. Weird. That was his word for forgery fraud and impersonating a dead man. I leaned forward. Print every page, every timestamp, every metadata line, and give me the entire digital history chain. He hit print. The machine screamed like it didn't want to be part of this crime either. Page after page spat out each one, a fresh nail in someone's coffin. When I walked out, the sun hit me full in the face. But this time it didn't burn. It cleared my head. Someone had forged my name. Someone had signed my dead father's name. Someone had used a retired notary's stamp. And someone had done it confidently because they did not expect me to return. But they had forgotten something important I always return. My next stop was the County Planning and Zoning Department, 2 blocks down, tucked behind palm trees that once had real green in them. The building looked exactly like it had when I filed a utility trench permit 14 years back. But inside, the mood felt off. The air felt heavier, like the building itself knew it was hiding something. The receptionist, a woman named Mara, glanced up with the kind of smile that told me she had already made peace with saying no to whatever I'd ask. "Morning," I said, placing my stack of documents on the counter. "I need to review zoning permits issued for parcel 86091, filed under my name or under any provisional claimant." Her smile froze. "Parcel number again," she asked, typing. I repeated it. She typed. Screen flicker. Then her eyebrows twitched. "Oh, that parcel was part of a provisional authorization last year. Temporary administrative housing. Temporary housing on my hilltop, with 20 luxury mansions. That was like calling a Ferrari a budget commute car. I want the file," I said. She hesitated, then picked up the phone. "You'll want to speak to Supervisor Sharp. He approved that one." "Perfect," I said. "Is he in?" Her lips pressed thin. "He's on leave." "How long?" 3 weeks. The exact amount of time since I returned to the United States. "How convenient," I muttered. She looked uncomfortable. "I can request the file digitally," printed, I interrupted. "All of it. Every permit, every map, every approval, every signature." The printer whirred again. This time the pages were worse. Not only did Supervisor Sharp approve permits, but he did so on dates that made no sense. The first permit was stamped February 14th. But drone photos, which I'd see later, showed bulldozers breaking ground 3 months earlier. Meaning the permits were backdated to cover what had already been built. A perfect paper lie. I leaned on the counter. "Do you usually issue construction approval after construction has already started?" Mara stiffened. All proper procedures were followed. Sure they were. In some alternate universe, I gathered the papers, stepped outside, and let the desert heat settle over me. But my thoughts were ice cold. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't incompetence. This was collaboration. An entire chain of people, possibly a network, had quietly agreed to pretend my land was theirs. I drove back toward the property. Not to confront Karen again, not yet, but to see, really see what they had done. As I approached the road that used to be a simple 2-track line of packed dirt now stretched out in smooth blacktop, fresh road paint, new street signs, electrical poles repainted and numbered like they'd always belonged to the HOA. Even the soil felt wrong beneath the tires, graded, flattened, engineered to fit someone else's dream. I stopped where my old mailbox used to stand. In its place was a sleek metal community cluster unit with the HOA logo stamped on the front. A delivery van pulled up beside me. The driver rolled down the window. "You waiting for mail?" he asked. "Not anymore," I said. He chuckled. "Oh, this box doesn't go here. All mail for Sandstone Ridge gets forwarded straight to their management office in Phoenix." Forwarded, meaning every notice sent to me, every legal letter, every update went straight to the HOA. They hadn't just stolen my land. They'd stolen my voice. I watched the van drive off, dust kicking up behind it. Then I sat there in my truck as the sun climbed higher. Papers on the passenger seat fluttered like they were trying to escape. But I held them. This wasn't confusion. It was infiltration. Smart, methodical, and designed to erase me. But they had made one mistake. They assumed I wouldn't come back. The desert heat hummed outside. The land felt quiet, too quiet. A quiet that used to comfort me. But now it felt like the pause before a storm. I placed my hands on the steering wheel, felt the sun-baked leather under my palms, and spoke aloud. "You wanted a paper war." I shifted into drive. "Fine, let's fight." I barely slept that night. The motel AC rattled in the window like it was arguing with the desert wind, and every time I closed my eyes I saw forged signatures, fake permits, and my father's name scribbled by some coward who thought the dead made convenient to accomplices. I sat at the little metal table lamp buzzing overhead papers, spread out like a battlefield. My deed, my maps, my tax receipts, and the fraudulent documents that claimed I had forfeited everything. Every line of that forged affidavit was a slap, but the signature that wasn't mine, and the cosigner that couldn't possibly be mine, that was the part that rooted itself in my chest like a thorn. By dawn, I realized the truth. This wasn't the kind of fight a man won by raising his voice. This was the kind of fight you won by bringing the right people to the table. The first call I made was to Dana Pritchard. She picked up on the second ring, her voice sharp and alert like she had already finished 2 cups of coffee and a legal brief before sunrise. "Martin, what's wrong?" I didn't bother softening the story. "Dana, the HOA built 20 houses on my land. They forged documents, signed my name, signed my dead father's name, used a retired notary, backdated permits, routed my mail to themselves." Silence. Not the shocked kind, the calculating kind. "Where are you?" she asked. "Cotton Hollow." "I'm 2 hours away," she said. "Email me everything you have. Don't contact the county again. Don't confront the HOA. Don't speak to anyone until I get there." Then she hung up. No goodbyes. No hesitation. That was Dana. Next I called Leo Barden. Leo wasn't a man who wasted words. He answered with the sound of typing behind him. "Riley, go." I told him everything, the hacking, the wiped camera logs, the signatures, the permits. The typing stopped. "They wiped your security feed?" Leo asked. "Yes, from a remote login. What IP HOA office?" There was a low whistle through his teeth. Leo didn't whistle unless something shocked him, which meant this was bad. "Send me all your files," he said. "Metadata included. I'll dig in immediately." "Leo," I said, "I need to know how deep this goes." All the way he replied and hung up. Finally, I called the one person who never tiptoed around corruption, Angela Dominguez. She answered on the first ring. "Martin, you alive for now. That bad worse." I explained the whole mess. There was a low, throaty laugh on the other end. "Forging a dead man's signature," she said. "Bold. Stupid. My favorite kind of case. Can you help text me the address? I'll start with the neighbors." Angela never asked about payment. She never asked for permission. She didn't negotiate. She just moved. By noon, they all showed up at the motel like I'd summoned some kind of justice cavalry. Dana came first. Black sedan, crisp white shirt, dark slacks. Hair pinned back like she was walking into a courtroom rather than a motel that smelled faintly of stale coffee and despair. Leo rolled in, next driving a dusty SUV, overloaded with equipment, laptops, cables, antennas, devices with blinking lights that probably weren't legal for civilian use. Angela arrived last boots, dusty, wearing sunglasses, even indoors carrying a thick manila folder like it contained someone's death sentence. We gathered in my tiny motel room, the 4 of us standing between a bedspread decorated in outdated floral patterns and a buzzing fluorescent light. I watched them take in the documents scattered everywhere, my neat desert life blown up into a bureaucratic crime scene. Dana was the first to sit, spreading my paperwork across the bed like she was laying out evidence for a trial. "This signature is fraudulent," she said. "Not even a good imitation." She tapped the second signature. "And this one, your father died in 7 years ago." She exhaled slowly. "So they forged a dead man. Wonderful." Leo sat cross-legged on the carpet, typing so fast I could barely see his hands. "Your security system was accessed remotely," he said, without looking up. "The deletion request came from a fiber line registered to the HOA office. And hold on, someone used zoning supervisor credentials to override your local-only setting." "Sharp," I muttered. "Sharp," Leo confirmed. "Except Sharp has been conveniently on leave since right around the time you got off the plane." Angela tossed her folder onto the table. "I talked to a drone hobbyist," she said. "Guy likes photographing the valley. Dates and geotags, everything." She spread the photos out like playing cards. My land, empty, then marked with commercial stakes, then trenched, then bulldozed, then 20 frames rising, all months before the permit date. "This," Angela said, tapping the earliest photo, "is the smoking gun. They built long before they had any legal right to start." Dana nodded slowly. That means the entire development rests on fraudulent ground. The moment a judge sees this, the HOA is in trouble. Leo lifted his laptop. Also, found something. He turned it toward me. A memo. Short, direct, damning. Karen wants the Martin parcel ready for full site integration by Q2. Assume he won't be back. Board needs this done quietly. The words hit harder than the heat outside. Assume he won't be back. Not hope. Not think. Not guess. Assume. They hadn't just gambled. They'd counted on my disappearance. Built 20 homes on top of it. Dana spoke first. This proves intent. Angela crossed her arms. Premeditation. Leo shrugged. Idiots. I leaned back in the motel chair, the metal creaking under me. My father always told me, there are two kinds of thieves, those who break in at night and those who wear a smile while they take what's yours. These people were the second kind. And they were about to learn why the first kind tends to live longer. What's our move, I finally asked. Dana didn't miss a beat. We file an emergency injunction. Freeze everything the HOA is doing. We walk this into a courtroom and bury them with their own paperwork. Angela nodded. I'll work on witness statements. Contractors never stay quiet when the heat turns up. Leo closed his laptop. I'll map the entire digital trail. When we're done, a judge will be able to follow it like footprints in fresh snow. I looked around at the three of them, this improbable team assembled in a rundown motel room. And for the first time since I turned onto my old dirt road, I felt something like stability settle in my chest. They thought I wouldn't come back, I said quietly. Dana smiled, sharp and cold. Well, surprise. Angela cracked her knuckles. Time to make them sweat. Leo simply said, let's make them regret ever touching your land. I nodded slowly. They built 20 homes on my hilltop. Dana tilted her head. Then we make them pay rent. 2 days later, I found myself walking into a mediation room that smelled like stale coffee, polished wood, and corporate arrogance, the sort of place where people pretend to solve problems they actually created. Dana walked beside me, calm and coiled like a snake that knew exactly when to strike. Leo carried a slim recording device stitched into the lining of his jacket. Angela stood near the back, arms crossed, scanning the room the way a former NYPD detective does when she expects trouble. Across the long conference table sat the entire HOA delegation, Karen perched like a queen bee in a tailored Navy suit. Her attorney, a slick man whose tie cost more than my first pickup truck, 2 board members I didn't recognize but instantly disliked, and Greg the dentist, whose face tried very hard to look stern but failed miserably. They all froze when we entered, not out of fear, out of annoyance. In their minds, I was supposed to be a harmless, confused old man who would show up alone, apologize for causing trouble, and quietly accept whatever crumbs they were willing to toss my way. Instead, I walked in with a legal strike team. The mediator, a woman with an overly gentle voice and the expression of someone who'd never experienced real conflict in her life, motioned us to sit. Let's try to resolve this calmly, she said, smiling as if we were here to negotiate over a parking ticket. We're all neighbors here. Karen gave me a smile so thin it could have sliced paper. I'm glad you could join us, Mr. Martin, she said sweetly. I hope today we can clarify this misunderstanding. I settled into my chair, leaning back like a man who had all the time in the world. Misunderstanding, I repeated. Is that what we're calling forgery these days? Karen's smile flickered. Her attorney cleared his throat, ready to interject, but Dana raised a hand slightly, barely a gesture, and he closed his mouth like someone had flipped his off switch. Mr. Martin, Karen said, still holding on to that brittle smile, if you had kept your mailing address updated, none of this would have happened. We sent numerous notices to yourselves, Dana cut in. Every piece of mail for this property was forwarded to your management office. That isn't accidental. That's obstruction. Karen's face hardened for a fraction of a second before sliding back into professionalism. We followed county procedure. Interesting, Dana replied smoothly. Because the county disagrees. Karen shifted in her seat. Her lawyer leaned forward, prepared with a stack of talking points, no doubt rehearsed. The HOA acted in good faith under emergency development authorization. The land appeared abandoned, I laughed. Loud enough that it startled the mediator. Appeared abandoned, I repeated. That what you call 30 years of my work, my home, my property. Karen's eyes narrowed, but she kept quiet. Dana placed her tablet on the table and tapped a document. Before we move forward, I'd like clarification on one detail. Your affidavit claiming the land was forfeited, who notarized it? Karen didn't hesitate. A contracted notary service we use for digital filings? Standard practice. Leo looked up from the corner of the room, expression blank as stone. He was already recording. Dana's tone remained soft and controlled. "You're certain it was a legitimate notary?" "Yes," Karen said immediately. Because Dana continued the name on the affidavit as a man who's been retired for 5 years, and he testified that he never notarized anything for you. Karen blinked. Just once. But it was enough. Her attorney began flipping through his papers, suddenly frantic. "That's impossible," he muttered. "Our service handles what Dana asked. Forgery, identity fraud, or just pushing documents through the county system without verification." Karen lifted her chin. "We are a respected community organization. We don't engage in fraud." Leo finally spoke from his corner. His voice was quiet, but the room tilted toward him anyway. "The upload trail for your digital notarization," he said, "originates from the Stone Ridge HOA office, not from a third-party service. And the certificate chain doesn't match the notary's credentials. It matches a shell account." Dead silence. Even the mediator stopped breathing for a moment. Karen's lawyer opened his mouth, perhaps to deny everything, perhaps to declare the earth flat, but Dana wasn't done. She selected another document on her tablet and slid it across the table. "We also have this." Karen looked down, and her face drained of color. It was the memo, the one Leo found. "Assume he won't be back," I said gently. "That one's my favorite." Karen's jaw tightened. That memo was taken out of context. "Would you like to provide the context?" Dana asked. Her lawyer jumped in. "This document was illegally obtained. Information posted on an unsecured HOA portal," Dana corrected, "is not private, and the metadata proves it was created by a board member." The mediator tried to intervene. "Let's try to keep this constructive," but the dam had already cracked. Angela stepped forward, dropping a folder onto the table. When construction was underway, she said calmly, "Multiple contractors confirmed they were hired months before permits were filed. We also have drone footage showing foundation work 3 months before the zoning office approved anything." She flipped open the folder, photos, timestamps, geotags. "You didn't think anyone documented that, did you?" she asked, her voice polite, but sharp enough to cut stone. Karen's attorney rubbed his forehead, eyes squeezed shut. He knew exactly what these photos meant. Dana folded her hands. "Miss Holdridge," she said, "you've claimed good faith. But what we're seeing here is deliberate, organized fraud. And unless your board would like to defend this in a criminal courtroom, you should consider being honest right now." Karen inhaled through her nose and exhaled slowly. A queen realizing her crown had slipped. Her voice cracked just slightly when she spoke. "We acted based on county assurances." Dana smiled without warmth. "Wonderful. Then you won't mind when we subpoena everyone at the county involved, including Supervisor Sharp." Karen's hand clenched around her pen. All the polished confidence she walked in with began to drain away. Her lawyer placed a hand on her arm. "Karen, don't say another word." But she did. "Because pride makes people stupid. We believe the land was unused," she snapped. "We improved it. We added value." "To who?" I asked quietly. "Not to me." Her mouth opened, closed. Her eyes flashed with something between rage and panic. She was unraveling thread by thread. And then she made the biggest mistake of all. She leaned forward and said, "The community needed these homes. One man shouldn't stand in the way of progress." Dana's smile sharpened. "There it is." The room fell silent. Leo ended the recording with a soft click. The mediator eventually cleared her throat and muttered something about a 10-minute recess, but nobody moved right away. They all knew what had just happened. Karen had admitted motive. She had admitted the mindset behind the fraud. She had admitted the intent to take my land, the 3 pillars of any conspiracy case. As we stood to leave the table, Angela whispered in my ear, "They're rattled. Next time they'll break." I glanced back at Karen. She wasn't looking at me anymore. She was staring at the memo in front of her like she wished she could set it on fire with her eyes. For the first time since I'd returned home, I felt like the land itself breathed easier, like it knew someone was finally fighting for it. And I promised it silently that I wasn't stopping until every lie these people built was reduced to dust. The courthouse in Cotton Hollow wasn't grand. It wasn't marble columns and echoing halls. It was a sun-baked, sand-colored building with faded flags and creaky benches, exactly the kind of place where local drama usually meant fence disputes or someone's goat wandering into someone else's cucumber patch. But that day, the place buzzed like a disturbed beehive. Reporters lined the steps. Neighbors whispered on the sidewalk. Even people who had no clue who I was had shown up, eager to witness what they were already calling the HOA showdown. I walked in with Dana first. Leo and Angela followed behind, each carrying folders thick enough to suffocate a liar at 20 paces. Inside the hearing room, Karen sat stiffly at the defendant's table. She wore another corporate suit, this one darker, sharper, as if she believed dressing like a CEO would make the truth behave differently. Her lawyer sat beside her, flipping through papers so aggressively he looked like he was trying to start a fire with friction alone. When Judge Evelyn Harper entered, the room went still. Harper was in her late 60s, silver hair, pulled tight glasses, perched low voice, strong enough to quiet a bar fight just by clearing her throat. The kind of judge who didn't tolerate theatrics, which was ironic considering the circus that was about to unfold in her courtroom. She looked out over the room, then at me. "Mr. Martin," she said. "Miss Pritchard, proceed." Dana rose with the calm of a surgeon who had already rehearsed the operation. "Your Honor," she began, "we intend to demonstrate that the 20 homes constructed on Mr. Martin's land were built through a coordinated effort involving forged documents, falsified permits, unauthorized digital activity, and deliberate attempts to obstruct communication with the rightful owner." She spoke clearly, each word a nail hitting wood. Across the room, Karen's lawyer rolled his eyes. "Bad move," the judge noticed. Dana called her first witness, a young clerk from the county records office. He walked nervously to the stand and swore in. She handed him the fraudulent affidavit. "Is this the document filed under my client's parcel?" she asked. "Yes," he replied. "Is this Mr. Martin's signature?" "No, ma'am." "Is the co-signer Mr. Gerald Martin alive?" He swallowed. "No. Records show he passed 7 years ago," the courtroom murmured. Someone in the back whispered, "Oh, hell." Judge Harper banged her gavel once. "Order." Next came the retired notary Leonard Pierce. He looked like an old hound dog with kind eyes and too many years spent signing other people's problems. "Mr. Pierce," Dana said, "did you notarize this affidavit?" "No, ma'am," he answered. "I haven't notarized anything since 2018. Would you say this is your seal?" He shook his head. "That's a copy. Someone scanned my old stamp." Another wave of murmurs. The judge leaned slightly forward, not in shock but in confirmation. She already suspected this case would be dirty. Now she knew. Karen's lawyer objected, claiming the notary might be misremembering. Harper stared at him over her glasses like he had just handed her a live rattlesnake. "Overruled," she said sharply. "Sit down, counsel." Then came Leo. If the clerk and notary were the warm-up act, Leo was the showstopper. He took the stand wearing a neutral expression, as if he weren't about to dismantle the HOA's entire digital infrastructure with a few sentences. "Mr. Barden," Dana said, "you examined Mr. Martin's home security system." "Yes." "What did you find? 6 months of footage were deleted. How remote login?" From where he slid a printout across the table. "From an IP block registered to the Stone Ridge HOA administrative office." Even I felt the room inhale. "And the authorization credentials?" Dana asked. "Linked to a zoning supervisor's login." "Supervisor Sharp," Dana added. Leo nodded. "Correct." Karen's lawyer leapt up. "This is circumstantial." Leo tilted his head slowly, almost pityingly. "Sir," he said, "when someone hacks into a system, erases footage, uses stolen credentials, and the trail leads directly to their office, it stops being circumstantial." The judge's pen paused mid-note. The jury of onlookers, because that's what they felt like, hung on to every word. But nothing prepared the room for the next witness. Angela. She stepped up to the stand boots, clicking a folder under one arm. She didn't look like a detective trying to impress anyone. She looked like a woman who had spent decades coaxing confessions from hardened criminals. Dana approached. "Miss Dominguez, you investigated the construction timeline I did. What did you find?" Angela opened her folder, not dramatically, just factually, and laid out photo after photo. Drone shots, foundation trenches, bulldozers, lumber deliveries, frames rising under the desert sun, all months before the permit date. "In your expert opinion," Dana asked, "was this construction lawful?" "No," Angela said. "This was a planned land grab." Karen's attorney erupted. "Objection, speculation." Angela didn't blink. "It's not speculation when the evidence is this clear." The judge motioned for Dana to continue. "Proceed." Dana walked to the judge's bench, placed a printed memo into evidence, and said, "Your Honor, this document was recovered from the HOA's internal system." Judge Harper lifted the paper. "This says, assume he won't be back." Karen visibly flinched. The judge looked at her over the rim of her glasses. "Miss Holdridge," she said slowly, "would you care to explain this?" Karen's lawyer whispered urgently, "Don't speak." But Karen's pride was louder than her attorney's advice. She stood. "Your Honor," she said stiffly, the memo was informal. "The land needed development. We believed Mr. Martin had abandoned." Dana sliced the air with one word, intent. Karen froze. Dana stepped forward, voice quiet but lethal. You believed Mr. Martin wouldn't return. You believed you had the right to build on land you didn't own. You believed the permits could be falsified without consequence. That is intent, Miss Holdridge. Judge Harper raised a hand. Enough. The courtroom fell into absolute silence. After several moments of reviewing the pile of evidence, Judge Harper finally spoke. This court finds substantial evidence of deliberate misrepresentation, forgery, tampering with public records, and unauthorized construction on private land. Karen's shoulders collapsed inward, as if the words physically struck her. The judge continued. Effective immediately, full title and property rights are restored to Mr. Martin. All 20 structures are hereby deemed unauthorized and must be vacated within 15 days. A gasp rippled through the room. In addition, she added, this matter will be forwarded to the district attorney for criminal investigation. Karen's lawyer's folder slid from his hands and hit the floor with a soft thud. Then the double doors at the back opened. 2 sheriff's deputies walked in. They approached Karen. Miss Holdridge, one said, you are under arrest for suspected fraud, perjury, and conspiracy. The handcuffs clicked a sound sharper than any gavel strike I'd ever heard. Karen stared at me as they led her out. No rage, no smugness, just disbelief. Like she still didn't understand how the world she built on lies had collapsed so quickly. When the doors closed behind her, the entire courtroom exhaled. Dana leaned toward me. That, she whispered, was the beginning, not the end. And I believed her, because the storm wasn't over yet. But at least now, it was moving in the right direction. If you've never seen an entire HOA collapse in real time, let me tell you, it's not quiet. The days following the hearing were a blur of headlines, phone calls, and neighbors suddenly remembering they always suspected something was off. Reporters hovered outside the courthouse like vultures waiting for the next carcass to drop. Cameras pointed at me whenever I walked out. Microphones shoved forward with questions like, how does it feel to win? Do you plan to sue for damages? Is it true the HOA president forged your father's signature? I didn't answer most of them. Not out of spite, just exhaustion. The truth wears you down even when it's on your side. Dana handled most of the press. Leo stayed in the background quietly pulling more threads from the HOA's digital mess. And Angela spent her time interviewing contractors, neighbors, and former board members who suddenly discovered a powerful urge to confess now that Karen wasn't around to intimidate them. Meanwhile, I spent my days on the land, my land. I walked those dusty trails, ran my fingers along the old mesquite trees, and let the silence soak into me like water into dry soil. But 20 mansions sat there, 2 bright, polished reminders of what almost happened. Demolish them, one neighbor suggested when he drove by. Make a statement. Maybe it would have felt satisfying, maybe for 5 minutes. But then I'd be standing on a barren ridge with 20 piles of rubble and nothing else. The land wanted healing, not fire. On the 5th morning after the hearing, I got the call from Dana. The district attorney filed charges, she said. All of them. Against who? Karen, her lawyer, the zoning supervisor, 2 board members, and 1 contractor who got too greedy. They have enough to move forward. I felt a weight lift off my chest, one I didn't even realize I'd been carrying. What happens next? I asked. Now, she said. Now you rebuild. The law will handle the rest. That afternoon, Leo stopped by the motel with his laptop. You should see this, he said. He pulled up a folder, dozens of documents, internal emails, HOA meeting, transcripts, financial records, all of it collected from their unsecured network. What is all this? I asked. Their undoing, Leo replied. One email from a board member read, we need those homes up quick. Investors already paid deposits. Another said, don't worry about the owner. The county handled it. And the worst one from Karen herself, Martin's just some old desert hermit. He'll never come back. Leo looked at me. People like this always trip over their belief that no one's watching. Later that evening, Angela arrived carrying a stack of typed witness statements. People are ready to talk, she said. Turns out half the contractors hated working under the HOA. They'll testify that Karen pressured them to skip inspections and start early. I raised an eyebrow. Why speak now? Angela smirked. Because they smelled blood in the water. When you push a community too far, even the quiet ones find their voices. The next morning I went back to the ridge alone. The sun hadn't fully risen yet, and the sky was a pale wash of pink and gold. I stood at the edge of the old property line, the place where my grandfather once told me, land remembers who cares for it. He was right. It remembered, even under the mansions, even under the fresh pavement. The ridge still felt like mine. As I stood there breathing in the morning air, a truck pulled up behind me. It was a local builder, Tommy Bates, a man who'd known my family for generations. He stepped out dusting off his jeans. Heard what happened. Damn, shame what they did. Yeah, I said. But it's done now. He shook his head. No, sir. Now it's time to rebuild. You want help fixing your fences? I did. Tommy brought 5 of his workers that same afternoon. Together we tore down the HOA's custom metal gates and replaced them with honest wood posts, thick, rough, desert-worn. The sound of hammering felt like reclaiming a heartbeat. While we worked, Tommy said, you know you could make something out of those houses. Turn a bad memory into a living. I paused. The idea had been sitting in my head for days. What would you do with 20 empty mansions? I asked. Tommy chuckled. Rent them out. Folks love a good story. And yours hell people will pay just to take a selfie in front of the house the HOA stole. That night I walked through each home. They were beautiful in an artificial way, shiny counters, sterile tile floors, walls untouched by weather or time. They didn't belong to the desert, they belonged to an HOA brochure. So I changed that. For the next several weeks, I hired local carpenters, plasterworkers, and craftsmen to restore every house. We ripped out the generic finishes, replaced them with reclaimed pine adobe-style textures, desert stone. We installed wide porches facing the canyon. We let the land breathe into the walls. Each home became a blend of desert soul and modern comfort, something the HOA never understood. Word spread fast. People wanted to visit, to stay, to hear the story firsthand. The booking requests poured in before I even finished renovating the first 10. But the real victory came 2 months later when I finalized a surprising deal. The HOA, what remained of it, agreed to pay me monthly rent for the use of the community's shared facilities. They'd built the clubhouse, the fitness center, the pool. It was either that or see their investments rot. They chose rent. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same people who tried to erase me were now helping fund my retirement. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the canyon, I walked the ridge with a cup of coffee. The light turned the desert gold, and for the first time in over a year, I felt peace, true peace, settle inside me. A car drove up the road. A couple stepped out, middle-aged, polite, carrying a camera. Are you the owner? The man asked. Sure am. They say this is where the HOA tried to steal your land, I smiled. That's right. And now you rent the houses to tourists, the woman said, eyes wide. Yup, and the HOA pays me rent too, they laughed, amazed. Before they left, the man shook my hand. Honest question, he said. Was it worth fighting this hard? I looked out at the land, my land, breathing easy again under the open sky. Oh, absolutely, I said. Because the moment you stop defending what's yours, someone else will claim it. As they drove away, the wind picked up, carrying the scent of sage and warm stone. The quiet settled again, the same quiet I'd been chasing since the day I stepped on that plane. And for the first time since everything began, the silence didn't feel stolen. It felt earned. It took months for the dust to settle, literally and figuratively. Arizona storms have a way of blowing grit into every crack and crevice, and so did the fallout from the HOA's collapse. Even after the judge's ruling, even after the arrests, even after the headlines cooled down, I still woke some mornings unsure whether all of it had truly happened. Some part of me expected to walk outside and see those forged signs back on my land. Stone Ridge Estates. Members only. But no, they were gone. Hauled away like trash. What remained was mine. Yet the land still carried the echo of everything that happened. You can't tear down 20 mansions, 20 lies without leaving behind a few ghosts. But I didn't want ghosts. I wanted purpose. So I spent the weeks after the trial rebuilding, not the houses, not the fences, not even the land itself. I rebuilt my life. The first change I made was simple. I moved back into my old hilltop home. The porch swing creaked the same way it always had. The floorboards remembered my footsteps. The wind still sang through the canyon at dusk. All the little things the HOA had tried to bury were still there. And as I settled in, something unexpected happened. The locals came. Not out of curiosity, but out of respect. Old ranchers, young couples, even construction workers who'd helped build the HOA mansions showed up with their heads low, offering their hands. One man, a contractor with sunburned cheeks and eyes red from guilt, stood on my porch and said, Sir, Karen told us the land was cleared. She said the owner had sold it and moved overseas. We wouldn't have touched a single rock if we'd known the truth. I believed him. Most people aren't villains, they're just misled. I shook his hand and said, help me rebuild it right. And he did. The next weeks turned into a kind of pilgrimage. Workers spread out across the ridge, tearing down HOA fences, removing metal stakes, cutting away the artificial landscaping the HOA had forced into the desert. The land began to breathe again. Small tufts of sage returned. Earth cracked open under fresh sun. Coyotes prowled the edges again, curious but cautious. It felt right, but the biggest transformation was still ahead. The mansions, those 20 spotless, soulless homes, were no longer symbols of theft. They were opportunities. I approached them one by one. Some still had furniture left behind, the kind realtors use to trick buyers into imagining a life that doesn't exist. Others were stripped bare, echoing with emptiness. But all of them stood solid, sturdy, built by people who had no idea they were building on my land. I knew exactly what to do with them. When you fight a war of paperwork, there are no burning towers, no dramatic explosions. You don't get the satisfaction of watching an enemy fortress crumble. What you get instead is ownership, quiet, lawful, undeniable, and what you do with that ownership says everything about who you are. I wasn't going to destroy what they built. I was going to transform it. By midsummer, all 20 homes had been renovated desert style. Adobe touches, reclaimed wood beams, stone fireplaces, wide porches with views stretching across the valley. I hired every honest local craftsman I could find, and together we turned a crime scene into something rooted and beautiful. And people came, tourists, writers, photographers, veterans seeking solitude, families wanting someplace honest to stay. The place filled up faster than any of us expected. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the ridge and painted the sky with gold, I stood on my porch with a cup of strong coffee. The lights of the 20 homes flickered across the valley, like small fires, warm, alive, peaceful. I was halfway through my drink when a sheriff's SUV rolled up. Deputy Clark stepped out, a tall man with a mustache that probably had its own zip code. "Evening, Mr. Martin," he said. "Evening, Clark." He handed me a thick envelope. Latest update from the district attorney. I opened it slowly, scanning the first few lines. Clark watched my expression shift. "Good news?" he asked. "For me, yeah," I said. "Bad news for them. The charges were finalized. Karen, Sharp, Greg the dentist, 2 board members, 1 contractor who tried a little too hard to impress the wrong people, forgery, fraud, conspiracy, tampering with public records, abuse of zoning authority. Some would serve jail time. Others would face heavy fines and permanent bans from serving on any HOA board ever again." Clark nodded. "Justice took its sweet time," he said, "but it got there." "It always does," I replied, "if you push hard enough." After he left, I walked back to the porch railing and looked out over the ridge. A soft wind rustled the sage. Crickets started their nightly chorus. The lights from the newly restored houses twinkled like they were finally part of the land instead of intruders. It struck me then, quiet and slow, that everything they tried to take had become the foundation for something better. What you get instead is ownership, quiet, lawful, undeniable, and what you do with that ownership says everything about who you are. I wasn't going to destroy what they built. I was going to transform it. By midsummer, all 20 homes had been renovated desert style. Adobe touches, reclaimed wood beams, stone fireplaces, wide porches with views stretching across the valley. They'd rented one of the houses for the weekend and wanted to see the view from my porch. The man asked, "Is it true? The whole HOA tried to steal this place from you?" I nodded. He shook his head in disbelief. "And now," the woman said with a smile, "they pay you rent." "That's right." She glanced at the sunset, at the home I built, at the land, breathing under the open sky. "And you didn't give up?" "No," I said simply. "Because silence isn't surrender. It's strategy." They stayed for a while, watching the light fade. Then they thanked me and walked back downhill, their flashlights bobbing like fireflies. When they disappeared from view, I sat alone again, just me, the desert wind, and the hum of the land settling into night. As the last colors bled from the horizon, I closed my eyes and let the quiet wrap around me. Not the stolen quiet I'd found months ago, not the angry quiet after betrayal, but the true quiet, the sound of a place that finally remembered who it belonged to. And I whispered the same words I'd said when this all began. "I'm home." Because if you wait long enough, if you persist long enough, if you believe in what's right long enough, justice finds its way home. If this story moved, you leave a comment about what part resonated most, and don't forget to subscribe for more real HOA stories that remind us why standing up matters.